raw emotion seemed to emanate from the picture itself of Billy Ray Cyrus parked on his kitchen counter with his hand buried in a box of corn pops. It was a photo that accompanied an online teaser a few years ago for an interview with Billy Ray about his new album. Unfortunately, the album had been pushed back, and the article author from GQ magazine, a guy named Chris Heath, wasn't able to talk to him about his new album. However, with its release being pushed back and his marriage falling apart and his daughter out of control, Billy Ray Cyrus turned to more philosophical subjects. Subjects that, like coming full circle, as he said, talking about his life and their lives intertwined. He confessed his parenting errors, often neglecting discipline and often trying to be a friend instead of a father to his daughter. And at the time, videos of his daughter, Miley, engaging in self-destructive behavior littered the internet. Miley Cyrus's star rose to the stratosphere as Disney's Hannah Montana. Some of you may remember that back several years ago. She was 12 years old at the time, and now we look back and we see that she followed the same stardust trails of many teen stars before her. Miley's attempts to navigate the trials of coming of age or growing into adulthood while in the spotlight were dismal at best. Like all teens, she made her share of mistakes during those days, but unlike most, she had an audience of millions of people watching her as she seemed to self-destruct. Her mistakes, risque photo shoots, provocative performances, indecent clothing, even videos of her doing drugs, alarmed her parents, disappointed other people's parents throughout the country, and tarnished her singer's wholesome image up to that point. It's weird what we turn to and watch, like a train going off the rails. In the years since the interview with Billy Ray Cyrus, it seems that Miley has seemed to gotten a little bit of her act together. She's not as self-destructive maybe as she was, but she continues to exhibit salacious and lascivious behavior on and off stage, and many indiscretions continue to follow her. But compare her to others, her foray into the underbelly of Hollywood, we might call it, are somewhat tame compared to other people. But the publicity of her mistakes has made her a voyeuristic icon even today. They still watch her. She still does performances on television before millions of people. And what it has done is induced her father and her mother to rethink their lives. It's introduced them into the club of Hollywood parents who are forced to watch their children's train wreck play out on a national stage. She is joined in her life by other star-bursting teen idols of the past, like Amanda Bynes and Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohan and Macaulay Culkin, Dana Plato, Todd Bridges. How far can we go? It just seems like Hollywood gets hold of these children and tears them apart. Just utter the phrase childhood star, and eyebrows immediately raise, because we know what is happening. Everyone understands the implicit meaning behind that phrase, childhood star. Documentaries flood history of television about childhood stars who've died in their pursuits or have lost their image or have ruined their lives. And it goes way back from the hijinks of the Rat Pack to the substance abuse of the Brat Pack to the meltdown of modern starlets today. Hollywood leaves a wake of battered childhood stars and broken homes. Many quickly blamed the parents. And of course, Billy Ray and his wife Tish made the decision to move to Hollywood and let Miley become Hannah Montana. They chose to co-parent Miley with handlers and agents and producers and representatives and Disney. Big mistake. But we can't blame it all on the parents. Hollywood shares a lot of the blame too. It woos children and teens with the prospect of fame and fortune. It negotiates with parents and it exploits children, never revealing the perils of Tinseltown itself. One singer, Gary Allen, country artist, says, "They never told me about this part." They told me all about the glitz and the glamour and the fame and all the wonderful things, but they never told me about how it was going to be destructive to his life. Like the devil, Hollywood knows if the truth were fully known, that nobody would sign that contract. But it doesn't stop in Hollywood. In fact, a lot of people, we think about the idea of raised by Hollywood, like Miley Cyrus was. And truly, she was raised by Hollywood. Quickly, Hollywood's track record for childhood stars is dismal, and Billy Ray is learning that lesson the hard way, we would say. That's a hard lesson to learn, but their assault on the family extends beyond the industry. It poisons consumers as well. A society that romanticizes Hollywood royalty will mimic it like it's an apprentice to the master. Creators and producers and promoters of popular entertainment claim that their art simply reflects the culture. Sure, gratuitous violence, car explosions, promiscuous sexuality, we see that every day in our own lives, right? No, we don't. It's nowhere near as pervasive as Hollywood makes it seem. Nothing more than what we see in the everyday headlines? No. They like to say, we're not making this stuff up. This is real life. But the elephant in the room is advertising. You see, advertising exposes that lie. Entertainment media does not affect the culture, is what they say. Well, then why are people spending millions and millions and millions of dollars? Just a few weeks ago, the Super Bowl rolled around. One 30-second spot in the Super Bowl cost $5.6 million for the 30 seconds. That doesn't even count the production of the actual commercial. That's just 30 seconds of time. Why did they spend that much money? You think about companies like Pepsi and Tide and the crossover commercials and those that spent had several spots during the Super Bowl, spending $20 to $25 million for this one 4-hour time span because they knew that people would be watching. Do you think they spent all that money so they could reflect what the culture is? No. They spent that money so they could affect what the culture is. The truth is it's more a master than a mirror. That's why we do, they have product placement on movies. Years ago, there was one popular singer who wore a T-shirt on stage once that it was such and such elementary school. She just happened to come across a T-shirt. She didn't go to that school, wasn't connected to that school at all. That school could not make enough T-shirts for the demand of people who wanted that shirt just like her. Several years ago, Guide magazine had an article called The Overhauling of Straight America. The authors, Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen, outlined a strategy to change public opinion about homosexuality. Just one quote. They said the average American watches over 7 hours of TV daily. Those hours open up a gateway into the private world of straights through which a Trojan horse might be passed. Look, political activists know it. They know of Hollywood's power to shape opinion and lifestyle. Madison Avenue execs know it. Hollywood producers know it. And savvy consumers should know it. Hollywood is more master than mirror. So what do we do? What's this about? it's hard for us to look at the world around us with as much media that is happening, from television to movies to social media to YouTube. I mean, it's everywhere. We're constantly inundated by the world through these different ways, and we cannot afford to let Hollywood raise our children. God put an institution in place to raise the next generation. It's called the family, right? We understand that. Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22 and verse 6. Or we read again in Ephesians 6, verses 1 through 4, that children are to obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It is the first commandment with a promise. And fathers, do not provoke your children unto wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. This is what God has planned on how we are to raise generation after generation after generation. But with the ubiquity of television and the allurement of entertainment media, I think parents often struggle to raise godly children. How do we protect them? And some say, well, the answer is let's just completely tune out of society, out of television, out of movies, out of music. We're just going to cancel it all. And certainly that's one way that you could respond to it. But other parents seek rather to train their children on how to evaluate and avoid dangers. I think both of those approaches have value. Both have merit. But tonight, I just want to give you a couple of tips if you're one of those navigators, one of those that you don't want to tune out of everything. What can you do to help protect your family from being raised by Hollywood? First, number one, I would say treat Hollywood like a loaded gun. Obviously, we can sit here and say, well, because it's more dangerous than a loaded gun, right? But you think about when children are taught gun safety, the mystique of firearms are taken away, they are less apt to have accidents. Whenever the gun is put off like a mystery, hidden away, there's always that desire to go and find the hidden treasure and see what it's all about. I think sometimes that happens the same with entertainment media. There's, whenever it's hidden away and there's a mystique built up around it, children are inquisitive and they want to know more about it. And they're going to be at a friend's house or they're going to be somewhere else. And the opportunity to imbibe of television comes up. And we don't want to see an accident like a gun accident or weapon accident. And so children that are taught the dangers and the pitfall of Hollywood are less likely to be trapped by the industry's peril. Does that mean they never will be? No, it doesn't. Will they see some things they probably shouldn't see? Absolutely. I'm an adult and I see things that I shouldn't see on television. It's going to be there. But if we treat it where that we're educated in it, we're educating our children about the perils and just those subtle ways that television seeks to influence us, then they will be safer. They won't be completely protected, but they will be safer than if they're not taught those things. And so I would say treat it like a loaded gun. Teach them about those pitfalls and the subtleties, because, listen, in the end, being raised by Hollywood brings much graver consequence than a firearm accident. Secondly, I would say discuss the values and the morals with your children. Let them know what God expects. This helps them incorporate God into all areas of their life, especially areas that they don't normally associate with Him. Release God from the church building and invite Him into the home. Discussing values with your children helps develop spiritual discernment and helps us to see how God's will ought to influence our choices. And we start teaching that to them through such lessons as what shows should you be watching? What's appropriate for you? And sometimes even watching appropriate or what should be appropriate programming, we're still burned, right? We've learned that lesson with Disney I think every year for the past 30 years, right? At least. This year's big deal, just a few weeks ago, they introduced a movie with the first openly homosexual or transgender character on it in the history of Disney. Of course, a lot of people are celebrating that, but then a lot of people won't make it to heaven either. So it depends on what you want to celebrate. But we think about God's will and how it ought to affect our choices. And we're teaching that to our children so that as they grow older, the survival of their faith is going to depend on learning and applying the process of analyzing and seeing how that's going to affect me and how I can avoid those pitfalls. You know, we're told in Philippians chapter 2, verses 9 through 11, that every knee is eventually going to bow before him, and every tongue will confess him, right? And the promise is that if we have kept God's teaching for us in this life, and we've trained it to our children, we stand a better chance to stand before him on the day of judgment. So discuss values and morals with your children, and why do we not let children watch certain things? What's the danger in it? And if you happen to see something like that, what can you do? Those are real situations. Number 3, I would suggest that you use incidents in television shows or as movies as an impetus for family conversation. Think about Moses. He spoke of families ought to talk about God all the time in Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9. Everywhere you go, everything you're doing, you're talking about God. In modern times, families haven't stopped talking about God. In modern times, they've stopped talking, period. They don't even talk anymore. And use this as an opportunity to get talking with your children again, discussing issues broached on television. Why did that person die? What decision could he have made differently? Julie and I were talking about TV shows. You know, if people on television shows would say what they actually meant or what they wanted, TV shows would run 2-3 minutes tops. You'd have no misunderstandings. You would have no miscommunications. But you know that's not long enough for a 30-minute program. And so, but what if we were talking with our kids about what could she have said in that situation? What could she have done, or what should he have done? Those kinds of questions. Number one, it's just the opportunity to talk with your kids, and then that how does that parlay into everyday life? When you start talking about characters on TV, and then your son says, someone at school did that. Oh, what happened? These are great ways to get your kids talking and discussing these things. Discussing issues broached on TVs gets family talking again. Plus, with the right topics, the discussion can be centered around God and what he has to say about those particular events. Number 4, set limits on time spent in Hollywood. As children, my brother and I used to watch Saturday morning cartoons. Some of you may remember the Saturday morning cartoons. And we watched those cartoons right up to Mutual of Omaha. And then we stopped because Mutual of Omaha was boring. Now, if the television stations would have put 2 more hours of cartoons on before Mutual of Omaha, you know what we would have done? We would have watched 2 more hours of cartoons because that was fun. So we understand that television does capture our attention, and it draws us in. The new phenomenon on streaming television is binge watching, right? Show after show after show after show. And sometimes we lose track of the time. And so there's always something to watch. So we got to make our kids stop watching television, stop playing video games, stop surfing the internet, stop listening to music. Does that mean they stop forever? No, we're not talking about stopping forever. We're talking about set limits on the time and get them involved in activities. Kids, listen up. Get them involved in chores, because you need to be doing chores. Get them involved and just going outside to play. And, it's kind of sad now on Saturday morning cartoons. There's the advertisements to go outside and play, to remind kids to go outside and play. My parents, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, they all reminded us kids to go outside and play. I think once we started talking in the house, the next words you heard from any adult was go outside and play. If you're going to talk, go outside and play. That's just the way it was. And we need to get kids to go outside and play. There's snow, let them play in the snow. When it's raining, let them play in the rain. When it's hot, let them experience sweat. I think there's some kids that have never expunged a bead of sweat yet. And it's time to get out and sweat a little bit. That's life. So limit the amount of time that they spend with Hollywood. Number 5, know what your kids are watching or playing or listening to or reading. Know those things. Be informed. Informed parents make better choices. Sit down with your kids and watch their programs with them or play their video games with them. If the shows or the games contradict your values and the values you're trying to instill into your kids, talk to them about it. Why does this contradict what we're trying to learn? How is this detrimental to you and your relationship with God? And whenever it's something that is pulling them away from God, then it's time to cut those things off. Take it out of the lineup altogether. Research the shows that they like to watch. Look, there's a synopsis for every show before it ever comes on. Read about it. And if you don't like the synopsis, find something else to watch. Or say, we're going to skip that episode of our favorite program. And talk about why. Because we can get ahead of the ball game if we desire. And finally, on my list, plan your consumption diet. And what does that mean? If you set limits on how long they can plug in each day, then kids need to choose what shows or what games they're going to watch and with the limited time that they have. And we probably ought to be doing this as adults too. But imagine if what we're teaching our children is how to budget their time, how to prioritize their entertainment, and make choices between 2 or 3 shows that they really like. They want to watch all 3 of them. They've only got time to watch 2. Which 2 are they going to watch? What are the 2 that they watch? And so they're going to have to make a sacrifice. What does that sound like? That's us. We're going out to the store and there's 3 items that we really want. But we can only afford 2. What do? We have to make the sacrifice and not get the 3rd, right? But that's just budgeting. And so once we start learning or teaching them to budget their time, then they can parlay that into budgeting for financial things and budgeting dietary things, even what we eat in the future, and raising healthy children. Learning that the world is not your oyster. Learning that you don't get everything that you want. And that sacrifice, especially sacrifice for God, is important and necessary in everyday life. Look, Hollywood has raised far too many families. What it does not do is raise them in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. Billy Ray Cyrus introduced his daughter to the limelight and watched her drift further and further from his influence into the seductive arms of the stage. What goes around comes around, full circle. There's your full circle for Billy Ray. Yet we do not have to be in the biz to be corrupted by the biz. All we have to do is consume it with no filter, with no stop, with no hesitation, and pretend that what the world produces for us to watch and consume is healthy for the Christian heart. When you know it's not. We know that. So if we're going to be those that are navigating the perils of Hollywood, let's band together. Let's share ideas. Let's encourage one another. And let's be strong and healthy about our choices in serving God. What do we do to keep our minds pure? Well, the first thing is we got to get them pure. And we get that through the blood of Christ. Tonight you are separated from Christ. You need to come to him. Maybe you've fallen away, or you've just gotten weak in your own faith. You want the prayers of the congregation here. You want to be strengthened and encouraged and admonished even in order to be better. We ask you to come while we stand and while we sing.